No one remembered precisely who began the whisper, yet by the time the orchestra struck its third waltz, the rumor had traveled beneath every chandelier in Blackthorn Manor. The girl in the gray dress was not truly a lady. She was not quite a servant either. She existed somewhere between the polished world of privilege and the shadowed corridors beyond it, and society, which forgave many sins, rarely forgave uncertainty. The manor blazed with autumn splendor. Hundreds of candles shimmered against crystal prisms, scattering gold light across silk gowns, jeweled throats, and polished floors that reflected the dancers like a second ballroom beneath their feet. Outside, rain drifted across the dark countryside in silver veils, tapping softly against the tall windows. Inside, laughter rose and fell like music. Noblemen discussed estates. Mothers calculated marriages. Young women measured one another with smiles sharpened into weapons. Through this glittering world moved Eleanor Ashford. Her dress was neat but plain, fashioned from soft gray fabric that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She carried silver trays, refreshed crystal glasses, and navigated the crowded rooms with the practiced grace of someone determined never to be noticed. Yet people noticed her all the same. Some mocked her refined posture. Others laughed at the careful way she spoke. A few wondered why a servant possessed the bearing of a duchess. Eleanor heard every whisper. Years of hardship had taught her that humiliation rarely arrived as a shout. More often it came disguised as amusement, hidden behind fans and polite smiles. She had learned to endure it without lowering her eyes. Dignity, after all, cost nothing. It was the last possession poverty could not steal. "Poor thing," murmured one lady as Eleanor passed. "She carries trays as though she were receiving ambassadors," replied another. Their laughter followed her across the room. Eleanor continued walking. If the remarks wounded her, no evidence appeared upon her face. Near the grand staircase, the arrival of an important guest interrupted the evening's chatter. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Duke Sebastian Hawthorne had arrived. Tall, broad-shouldered, and impossibly composed, he entered the ballroom with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to commanding attention without requesting it. His dark evening coat fit perfectly. His expression revealed little. The responsibilities of title and inheritance rested upon him like an invisible mantle. Sebastian accepted bows and curtsies with practiced courtesy. His widowed mother approached immediately, already steering him toward a cluster of carefully selected young ladies. He listened patiently. He smiled when required. Yet there was a distance about him tonight. Alone. As introductions continued, his gaze drifted briefly across the ballroom and settled upon Eleanor carrying a tray of champagne glasses. A servant, he assumed. Nothing more. Within moments he looked away. The assumption might have remained unchallenged had Lady Beatrice Whitmore not decided to entertain herself. Beautiful, wealthy, and thoroughly conscious of both advantages, Lady Beatrice enjoyed the attention that followed her wherever she went. Discovering that several gentlemen were watching, she lifted a glass of red wine and beckoned Eleanor closer. "You there," she said sweetly. Eleanor approached. "Can you assist me?" "Of course, my lady." Beatrice smiled. Then she deliberately released the glass. Red wine splashed across pale satin and scattered over the polished floor. A collective gasp swept through nearby guests. "Oh, dear!" Beatrice exclaimed, though amusement sparkled plainly in her eyes. "What carelessness!" Several people laughed. Everyone understood what had happened. No one spoke. Eleanor knelt immediately and began gathering the shattered pieces. For one brief moment, the ballroom seemed to hold its breath. The humiliation was complete. Hundreds watched. No one intervened. Among those watching stood Sebastian Hawthorne. He saw the broken glass. He saw Lady Beatrice's satisfaction. He saw Eleanor's composed expression as she cleaned the mess created solely for her embarrassment. Something about the scene unsettled him, yet he remained where he was. Silence was easier than confrontation. A duke could overlook a minor cruelty. When Eleanor rose, she offered a polite apology for an accident she had not caused. The laughter resumed. The evening moved forward. But somewhere beneath Sebastian's calm exterior, a faint discomfort lingered. The ballroom gradually emptied as guests drifted toward card rooms and private conversations. Rain continued falling beyond the windows. Midnight approached. Eleanor escaped. She moved quietly through deserted corridors until she reached the old music room at the eastern end of the manor. No guest intruded. For the first time all evening, she was alone. The room glowed with firelight. An ancient piano rested near the windows. Eleanor crossed the carpet, removed her gloves, and sat before the instrument. Then she began to play. The first notes emerged softly. Soon the melody deepened. Sorrow flowed through it. Hope followed. The music carried memories too heavy for words and dreams too fragile for confession. Every humiliation of the evening seemed to dissolve into the rising harmony. Her hands moved with extraordinary skill. The piano answered with richness and depth that transformed the silent room. Unseen in the doorway, Sebastian stopped. He had been walking without purpose, seeking escape from conversations and matrimonial schemes. The music arrested him instantly. This was no casual accomplishment. This was mastery. He watched the woman he had dismissed hours earlier. Nothing about her resembled a servant now. The firelight touched her profile. The melody filled the room. Questions gathered in his mind. When the final note faded, Eleanor rose quickly, unaware she had been observed. She collected a folded letter from the piano bench and hurried toward the door. Passing Sebastian's hidden position, she disappeared into the corridor before he could speak. A moment later, something slipped from her hand. A sealed envelope rested upon the floor. Sebastian picked it up. The wax seal caught the firelight. His pulse slowed. Stamped into the crimson wax was an ancient crest he recognized at once, a noble family name believed ruined decades ago. And somehow, impossibly, the mysterious girl in the gray dress possessed its letter. The letter remained in Sebastian Hawthorne's possession long after the candles had burned low and the last carriage had vanished into the rain-dark countryside. Alone within his private study, he turned the envelope beneath the glow of a single lamp, tracing the faded crest impressed into the crimson wax. He knew that crest. Every noble family in England knew it. The House of Ashford had once stood among the country's most respected bloodlines. Their estates had stretched across counties. Their influence had touched Parliament and Crown alike. Then, almost overnight, scandal had destroyed them. Accusations of fraud, ruinous debts, and disgrace had swept through society like wildfire. The family vanished from fashionable conversation except as a cautionary tale. Yet somehow the girl in the gray dress carried their seal. Sebastian should have returned the letter unopened. Instead, curiosity lingered. Not the idle curiosity of gossip, but the deeper unease born when something refuses to fit its place. Everything about Eleanor Ashford seemed wrong. Servants did not play the piano with such mastery. Servants did not possess the posture of aristocracy. Servants did not carry letters bearing extinct noble crests. As dawn silvered the eastern horizon, he resolved to learn the truth. The following morning Blackthorn Manor awoke beneath a veil of mist. Dew clung to rose petals. Footmen hurried across gravel paths. Guests gathered for breakfast while conversations resumed with renewed energy. Sebastian found himself watching the room. More precisely, he watched Eleanor. She moved between tables pouring tea with the same quiet composure she had displayed beneath humiliation the previous evening. Not once did she seek attention. Not once did she appear eager to improve her position. It struck him that ambition usually announced itself. Eleanor concealed herself. The difference intrigued him. Their first conversation occurred by chance, also Sebastian allowed everyone to believe. Late that afternoon he entered the library, knowing perfectly well that Eleanor often delivered fresh flowers there. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting fragments of ruby and sapphire across towering bookshelves. She stood arranging roses when he approached. For a moment neither spoke. Then Eleanor curtsied politely. "Your Grace." "Miss Ashford." Surprise flickered across her features. Few people used her surname. Even fewer remembered it. "I did not realize you knew my name." "I make a point of learning the names of those within my household." The statement sounded noble. Both knew it was untrue. Something resembling amusement touched her eyes. A small victory, a small defeat. Sebastian found himself oddly grateful for both. Over the following days their paths crossed with increasing frequency. In the rose garden they discussed literature while autumn leaves drifted between marble statues. In the gallery they paused before old portraits and exchanged observations about history. During a walk through the eastern grounds, mist curled above the fields while distant church bells echoed across the countryside. Each conversation left Sebastian more unsettled than the last. Eleanor possessed education, refinement, intelligence, yet she carried herself with the caution of someone accustomed to disappointment. She answered questions without inviting sympathy. She revealed little while somehow revealing everything. The contradiction fascinated him. One afternoon they paused beside a weathered stone fountain. Water murmured softly beneath gray skies. "You speak as though you have traveled widely," Sebastian observed. "I have traveled enough to understand that fortunes are fragile things." The response carried hidden meaning. He sensed it immediately. "So you have known both comfort and hardship." A faint smile appeared. "Most people eventually know both, Your Grace." Before he could ask more, she excused herself. Again she left him with questions. Again he watched her disappear. Again he found himself thinking about her long afterward. The weather changed suddenly 3 days later. Heavy clouds gathered before noon. By evening, rain battered the manor with relentless force. Guests rushed indoors while servants secured shutters against powerful winds. Sebastian encountered Eleanor in a deserted corridor carrying linens toward the upper floor. Thunder shook the windows. A draft swept through the passage. Without thinking, he removed his coat. "Take this." She stared at him. "My lord, you are shivering." "I am quite well." "You are cold. And you are stubborn." For the first time, genuine laughter escaped him. The sound surprised them both. Finally, Eleanor accepted the coat. The dark wool settled around her shoulders. Far too large, far too intimate. For one suspended moment, neither looked away. The storm raged outside. Something quieter stirred between them. Then footsteps echoed from the nearby staircase. The spell broke. By morning, half the manor knew. By afternoon, everyone knew. By evening, the rumors had become impossible to contain. The Duke had given his coat to a servant. The Duke sought her company. The Duke neglected eligible ladies to converse with a woman of uncertain status. Whispers multiplied like sparks in dry grass. Lady Beatrice led the attack with particular enthusiasm. At luncheon, she remarked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "One must admire ambition when one sees it." Laughter followed. Several women glanced toward Eleanor. Several men joined the amusement. Eleanor endured it silently. Yet Sebastian noticed the slight tightening of her hands. He noticed because he had begun noticing everything. The scandal reached its inevitable destination. His mother, the Dowager Duchess, summoned him immediately. Her drawing room overlooked the western lawns. Rain streaked the windows. Disapproval sharpened every line of her elegant face. "I trust these stories are exaggerated." "They are stories." "That is not an answer." Sebastian remained silent. The Duchess studied him carefully. Then her expression hardened. "She is beneath your station." The words landed heavily. For reasons he could not entirely explain, they angered him. Perhaps station is not the only measure of a person. His mother stared. The disagreement ended without resolution. Yet the divide between them had widened. That evening Sebastian found Eleanor alone beside the conservatory entrance. Lantern light flickered across glass walls filled with sleeping roses. The air smelled faintly of rain. For several moments neither spoke. Then Eleanor drew his coat more tightly around herself. "Your kindness has created difficulties." "I regret the gossip." "I do not." Her answer surprised him. She met his gaze steadily. "What troubles me is that kindness from a man of your station can become cruelty without intention." The words struck deeper than accusation, because they contained truth. If society turned against her, he would remain a duke. She would bear the consequences alone. For the first time he understood the danger she faced. And for the first time he realized how much her opinion mattered to him. That night sleep proved impossible. Near midnight he returned to his study. The mysterious letter lay waiting inside his desk. At last he broke the ancient seal. His eyes moved rapidly across the contents. Then he stopped breathing. The document contained legal testimony, signatures, and evidence long believed lost. Evidence suggesting that Eleanor Ashford was not a servant at all. She was the last surviving heir to a noble title stolen from a family by scandal generations ago. Rain fell steadily throughout the following evening, turning the glass walls of Blackthorn Manor's conservatory into sheets of trembling silver. Beyond them, the garden slept beneath mist and darkness. Within, candlelight glowed among winter roses, their pale blossoms luminous against deep green leaves. Eleanor arrived precisely at the hour requested. Sebastian was already waiting. The letter had changed everything. not simply because it suggested a different history, but because it transformed suspicion into certainty. The mysterious servant possessed a connection to a full and noble house, and he could no longer ignore it. When Eleanor entered beneath an arch of climbing roses, she stopped. "You wish to see me, Your Grace." Her voice was calm, though caution lingered in her eyes. Sebastian stepped forward. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For believing the easiest explanation about you." A faint sadness touched her expression. "Most people do." Outside, rain traced winding paths down the glass. Inside, silence settled gently around the flowers and candle flames. Sebastian removed the letter. Recognition flashed across her face. "You found it." "I did." "You should not have opened it." "Perhaps not." She lowered her gaze. For several moments neither spoke. Then Eleanor released a quiet breath. "I suppose there's little point pretending now." "No, there never was much talent in me for pretending." He gestured toward a bench beside a marble fountain. "Will you tell me the truth?" She studied him carefully, measuring whether trust would be rewarded or punished. At last she Saturday. "My father was Edward Ashford," she began. The name carried weight. Edward Ashford had been blamed for the scandal that destroyed an entire family. He was accused of fraud and deception. Society decided his guilt long before any evidence appeared. "You believe he was innocent?" "I know he was." Her certainty never wavered. "My father spent years trying to clear his name. Documents vanished. Witnesses disappeared. Friends abandoned us. The title was stripped away. The estate was sold. Everything was taken." The words emerged quietly, yet each carried the force of memory. Sebastian listened without interruption. "My mother endured the disgrace with dignity," Eleanor continued. "But heartbreak leaves its own scars. By the time I was 18, she was gone. The conservatory seemed colder. And your father? He died 2 years later." No bitterness colored her voice, only exhaustion. For a moment Sebastian said nothing. Society often discussed ruin as though it were a lesson. Listening to Eleanor, he understood it as survival. "You carried all of that alone." A fragile smile appeared. "Not alone. One becomes acquainted with solitude. It is very loyal company." The answer pierced him because she spoke without self-pity. "And now?" he asked. "Now evidence has begun to surface." She glanced toward the letter. "Records, testimonies, fragments proving my father may have been framed by men who profited from our destruction. Then your family's name may be restored." "Perhaps." The words sounded fearful rather than hopeful. "You do not seem pleased." Eleanor looked toward the rain-dark gardens. When disappointment visits often enough, hope becomes difficult to welcome. Something shifted inside him. All evening he had intended to discuss documents and titles. Instead, he found himself concerned only with the woman before him. "You deserve justice." A small laugh escaped her. Justice and deserving rarely travel together. Then they should. Their eyes met. The moment stretched longer than either intended. For the first time, the distance imposed by rank seemed fragile. The candles burned lower. The rain softened. Then Eleanor spoke quietly. "I no longer fear poverty, Your Grace." He waited. Only disappointment. The vulnerability of the admission transformed the air between them. Sebastian understood she was not speaking only about inheritance. She was speaking about trust, promises, and the danger of believing in something beautiful. His heart responded before reason could intervene. He wanted to tell her she would never face disappointment again. Duty restrained him. Years of discipline held the words captive. The silence that followed felt almost painful. At last Sebastian rose. "There is a formal dinner tomorrow evening." Her expression guarded itself. "I am aware. I would like you to attend. As a servant. As my guest." Shock flashed across her face. "Your Grace, that would create a scandal." "It already has." The faintest smile appeared. "You are remarkably reckless for a duke." "Only recently." A laugh escaped her. The sound lingered in his thoughts. The following evening the dining hall glittered with candlelight and silver. Conversations flowed easily until Sebastian entered. Then silence spread through the room. Every noble head turned. Every whispered rumor seemed to pause, because beside him walked Eleanor Ashford, not carrying trays, not serving wine, walking at his side. Lady Beatrice nearly dropped her glass. The Dowager Duchess went pale. Shock rippled through the assembled guests. Yet Sebastian continued forward without hesitation. For one extraordinary moment, Eleanor looked less like a forgotten woman, and more like exactly what she had always been. Someone impossible to overlook. That night Eleanor stood alone beside her narrow window overlooking the eastern lawns. The manor slept, yet sleep would not come to her. She could still feel the weight of every stair in the dining hall and hear the silence that had followed her entrance. More troubling was Sebastian himself. His loyalty had become impossible to dismiss as mere courtesy. For years she had trusted no future she could not control. Now a single man had unsettled that certainty. Hope, the very thing she feared, had begun knocking quietly upon the door of her guarded heart once again. The dinner ended beneath strained smiles and concealed outrage. Hours later, after the guests withdrew, a messenger arrived from London carrying urgent correspondence. The letter was delivered directly into the Dowager Duchess's hands. She read it once, then again, her face draining of color. Before dawn, word reached Sebastian. Another document concerning the Ashford scandal had surfaced. Unlike the first, this one threatened not to restore Eleanor's claim, but to destroy it forever. The crisis arrived with the speed and cruelty of a winter gale. By noon the following day, copies of the newly discovered document had circulated through drawing rooms, gentlemen's clubs, and breakfast tables across London. By evening the story had reached Blackthorn Manor, carried not by messengers alone but by whispers eager for scandal. The document appeared devastating. It claimed that Edward Ashford had not been the victim of deception, but its architect. It described hidden accounts, forged transactions, and deliberate fraud. More troubling still, the signatures upon the pages seemed authentic. Society needed little encouragement. Within hours, opinions hardened into verdicts. The fallen Ashfords were guilty after all. The mysterious girl in the grey dress was merely a clever pretender. The rumors multiplied with merciless enthusiasm. At dinner that night, conversation stopped whenever Eleanor entered a room. Guests exchanged meaningful glances. Smiles became colder. Even servants, previously kind, seemed uncertain how to behave. The atmosphere felt poisoned. Eleanor endured it in silence. Yet Sebastian noticed a change immediately. He noticed how her shoulders stiffened when laughter erupted behind her. He noticed how she kept her gaze lowered whenever strangers approached. Most of all, he noticed that the fragile hope he had seen in her eyes was slowly disappearing. That realization troubled him more than the scandal itself. The following morning the Dowager Duchess requested his presence. Her expression was grave. The newspapers lay scattered across a polished table. Every headline repeated the same accusations. Every article questioned Eleanor's character. His mother folded her hands carefully. This must end. Sebastian remained standing. You have reached that conclusion quickly. I reached it the moment this girl became a source of public embarrassment. Anger stirred beneath his calm exterior. Eleanor has done nothing wrong. Perhaps. The Duchess glanced toward the newspapers. Yet appearances matter. They should not matter more than truth. His mother sighed. You speak as though truth governs society. It never has. The statement carried the weary certainty of experience. Unfortunately, it also carried accuracy. The Duchess rose. There is still time to correct this situation. Her meaning was unmistakable. Distance yourself from Eleanor. Preserve your reputation. Protect the family name. Sebastian looked toward the rain-dark windows. For most of his life he had obeyed such expectations. Duty had always arrived before desire. Obligation had always triumphed over feeling. Yet lately those familiar principles felt strangely hollow. I will not abandon her. The Duchess stared. Silence stretched between them. At last she spoke. If you continue down this path, you may lose more than public approval. The warning lingered long after he departed. Elsewhere within the manor, Eleanor faced her own battle. The accusations had reopened wounds she had spent years learning to survive. Every whispered remark echoed old humiliations. Every suspicious glance reminded her how quickly society embraced cruelty. By afternoon she made a decision. She would leave, not because the rumors frightened her, not because she doubted her father's innocence. She left because Sebastian's future should not become collateral damage in a war she had inherited. The choice broke her heart. That evening she packed her few belongings. The process required little time. Years of hardship had taught her to travel lightly. When everything precious can be taken away, possessions lose their power. Before dawn she wrote a brief note. The words came slowly. Every sentence felt like surrender. When the letter was finished, she placed it upon her bedside table and slipped quietly from the manor. Rain greeted her outside. The carriage waiting at the gate carried her toward the countryside, toward uncertainty, away from temptation, away from Sebastian. Several hours later he discovered the note. The message contained no accusations, no dramatic farewell, only gratitude. That somehow made it worse. He read it twice, then a third time. By the final line he understood something with painful clarity. The manor no longer felt like home without her. Every corridor reminded him of accidental meetings. Every garden path recalled conversations. Every room seemed occupied by absence. For the first time in years, duty offered no comfort. By noon he had reached a decision. Ignoring objections from family and friends alike, Sebastian left Blackthorn Manor. The search consumed 2 days. Winter wind swept across open fields. Rain transformed roads into rivers of mud. He followed fragments of information from village to village. An innkeeper remembered a quiet woman traveling alone. A stable boy recalled a gray dress. A shopkeeper described thoughtful eyes and careful manners. Each clue carried him farther from the world of titles and expectations, closer to the truth of his own heart. At sunset on the third day, he found her. A small cottage stood beside a frozen stream at the edge of a distant village. Smoke curled from the chimney. Golden light glowed behind modest curtains. For several moments Sebastian remained motionless. The journey was over. The difficult part remained. He approached the door and knocked. When Eleanor opened it, surprise swept across her face. For an instant neither moved. Neither spoke. Then she whispered, "Your Grace." The formal title sounded strangely painful. "I have been looking for you. You should not have come." "I know." The honesty startled her. Rain tapped softly against the roof. The room behind her glowed with firelight. For the first time, there were no spectators, no gossip, no expectations. Only two people standing between fear and possibility. "You belong at Blackthorn Manor," she said quietly. "No." His answer came immediately. "Eleanor, I believed that once." The fire crackled softly. She waited. Sebastian stepped closer. His voice lowered. "I spent years searching for the woman society expected me to marry." Emotion tightened his chest. "I met dozens." A fragile silence filled the room. Then he spoke the truth he could no longer deny. "I sought a lady and found none worthy. I sought the truth and found you." Tears brightened her eyes. Hope and fear collided within them. For one beautiful moment, the future seemed ready to change. Then the sound of approaching horses shattered the silence outside. Both turned toward the window. Several riders were approaching through the rain, carrying official government seals and a leather case containing documents that would finally determine whether Eleanor Ashford's family name would be restored or buried forever. I've written the final section in a reusable writing block format as requested. The riders arrived beneath a curtain of rain, their horses splashing through muddy ruts as they approached the small cottage. Lantern light flickered against polished saddles and dark coats marked with official insignia. The lead gentleman dismounted first, carrying a leather case secured by brass clasps. Inside the cottage, silence settled heavily. Eleanor stood motionless. Sebastian remained beside her. For years he had imagined this moment. She had dreamed of justice, feared disappointment, prepared herself for both. Yet now that judgment had finally arrived, she felt neither courage nor certainty, only dread. The knock sounded, firm, unavoidable. The lead investigator entered after receiving permission. Rainwater glistened upon his shoulders. He bowed respectfully. "Miss Ashford." Eleanor managed a nod. The man studied her carefully. Then he opened the leather case. Several documents emerged. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, every heartbeat seemed amplified. "The inquiry has concluded." No one moved. The evidence required considerable examination. His gaze shifted briefly toward Sebastian before returning to Eleanor. Multiple records previously believed destroyed were recovered from private archives. Hope stirred. Dangerously. Eleanor forced herself not to trust it. The investigator unfolded a final document. Then he spoke. The charges against Edward Ashford have been proven false. For a moment she did not understand. The words reached her ears, yet meaning arrived slowly, as though her mind had forgotten how to recognize good fortune. The investigator continued. Testimony confirms that financial records were deliberately altered by several business partners who profited from your father's ruin. The room blurred. Eleanor blinked rapidly. Years of grief, years of humiliation, years spent defending a man society had condemned. All of it suddenly shifted. Not erased, never erased, but transformed. The investigator placed additional papers upon the table. The Crown has formally recognized the findings. Sebastian watched her carefully. Emotion moved across her face in fragile waves. Disbelief, relief, sorrow, joy. They appeared together rather than separately, as though every lost year demanded acknowledgement before healing could begin. The Ashford name is officially restored. The words shattered the final barrier. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. She turned away, not because she was ashamed, because dignity could only withstand so much happiness before surrendering. For several moments no one spoke. The investigator respectfully allowed the silence. He understood this was not merely a legal victory. It was a return of a stolen inheritance measured not in wealth, but in honor. When Eleanor finally found her voice, it emerged barely above a whisper. My father was innocent. The investigator inclined his head. Yes, Miss Ashford. The simplicity of the confirmation struck her harder than any speech could have. My father was innocent. The sentence echoed through every memory, every insult, every sacrifice, every lonely year. And now the truth existed beyond her defense, beyond her belief, beyond doubt itself. The investigators departed shortly afterward, leaving copies of the official findings behind. Night deepened. The storm began to weaken. Only Sebastian remained. The cottage felt transformed. Not larger, not grander, yet somehow brighter, as though justice itself had altered the air. Eleanor stood beside the fire. Her hands trembled slightly. For the first time in years, she no longer carried the burden alone. Sebastian approached quietly. You should be happy. She laughed softly through lingering tears. I believe I am. Then why do you look as though you're grieving? The question was gentle, not accusatory, merely perceptive. Eleanor stared into the flames. Because I wish my parents had lived long enough to see this. Pain softened her expression. My mother died believing the world considered us frauds. Her voice faltered. My father died trying to prove his innocence. Sebastian reached for her hand. The gesture was simple, yet profoundly intimate. They will be proud of you. She closed her eyes briefly. Perhaps they would. The possibility itself felt healing. Several days later they returned to Blackthorn Manor. News traveled faster than winter winds. By the time their carriage reached the estate, society had already begun its astonishing transformation. The same people who once whispered now offered congratulations. The same households that had excluded Eleanor suddenly extended invitations. The same women who mocked her now praised her grace. The hypocrisy was breathtaking, yet entirely predictable. Society rarely apologized. It merely adjusted its opinions and pretended consistency. A week later, Blackthorn Manor hosted a gathering unlike any before. The grand ballroom glittered once more beneath crystal chandeliers. Music drifted through elegant rooms. Guests arrived dressed in velvet, silk, and jewels. Yet the atmosphere differed from earlier occasions. This time, curiosity had been replaced by admiration. The restored Ashford heiress had become the evening center of attention. Eleanor moved through the crowd with remarkable composure. She accepted greetings politely, thanked guests graciously, smiled when necessary. But Sebastian noticed something important. None of it impressed her. The attention, the praise, the sudden affection. She recognized it for what it was. Temporary, conditional, superficial. And because she recognized it, she remained untouched by it. That realization deepened his admiration. Many people changed when fortune arrived. Eleanor remained herself. Later that evening they escaped the ballroom together. The gardens lay quiet beneath fresh snowfall. Moonlight silvered every branch and pathway. The world seemed suspended between seasons. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable, earned. At last Sebastian stopped beside the frozen fountain where they had once spoken as near strangers. How distant that evening seemed now, and yet how close. Eleanor. She turned. Something in his voice commanded full attention. For a moment he simply looked at her, not the restored heiress, not the daughter of a noble house, not the woman society now celebrated. Only Eleanor, the woman who had endured humiliation without bitterness, the woman who had survived disappointment without surrendering kindness, the woman who had quietly transformed his understanding of love. If the title had never returned, he asked softly, would you still have chosen me? The question carried vulnerability unusual for a duke, perhaps unusual for any man, because beneath it existed another question. Would you have loved me if I could offer only myself? Eleanor understood immediately. Snowflakes drifted lazily through moonlight. The world seemed to wait. She stepped closer. Only if you remained the man who chose me before it did. Emotion flickered across Sebastian's face. Not dramatic, not theatrical, simply honest. The answer mattered, more than approval, more than inheritance, more than reputation, because it confirmed what he had suspected all along. The foundation beneath them was real, not circumstance, not status, love. Several weeks later, on a bright winter morning, church bells rang across the countryside. Villages lined snowy roads. Carriages arrived from every direction. The ancient cathedral stood beneath clear skies, its stone walls glowing softly in winter sunlight. Inside, candles illuminated polished wood and stained glass. Nobles gathered in formal rows. Servants filled the rear pews. Old distinctions seemed less important today. Many who attended remembered the scandal. Many remembered the whispers. All remembered the uncertainty. Now they had come to witness something entirely different. Justice, redemption, love. Eleanor entered the cathedral wearing ivory silk that shimmered like morning light upon snow. Yet those who truly knew her understood the gown was not what made her beautiful. It was peace. The burden she had carried for years was finally gone. Sebastian waited near the altar. When their eyes met, every sound seemed to fade. The guests disappeared. The cathedral vanished. Only certainty remained. The ceremony unfolded with solemn grace. Vows were exchanged, promises spoken, a future chosen, not arranged by society, not dictated by expectation, chosen. When they emerged beneath the cathedral doors, sunlight flooded the steps. Cheers erupted. Church bells answered. Winter air sparkled. For the first time in many years, the world felt generous. Months later, within a quiet room at Blackthorn Manor, two objects rested side by side upon a polished desk. One was a wedding portrait. The other was a letter that had changed everything. The letter Sebastian had discovered beside the piano. The letter that should never have existed. The letter that carried the first fragile thread of truth. Its seal remained slightly worn, its paper faintly aged. Yet it represented far more than evidence. It represented endurance. A daughter refusing to abandon her father's name. A woman preserving dignity when society offered none. A truth patient enough to survive decades of lies. Outside the window, spring had begun replacing winter. New blossoms appeared across the gardens. Life moved forward, as all life eventually must. And if one listened carefully, beyond the laughter drifting through open corridors and beyond the distant song of birds returning to the estate, there remained a quieter lesson hidden within the story. Titles could be lost. Fortunes could vanish. Reputations could be stolen. Yet character endured. The world had looked at Eleanor Ashford and seen a servant. Then it saw an heiress. Both judgments were incomplete, because her worth had never depended upon either. The greatest revelation was not that she belonged to a noble house. It was that she remained noble even when the world denied it. And perhaps that was why love found her at last. Not because justice arrived. Not because fortune returned. But because one man learned to see beyond appearances and discovered the extraordinary heart hidden beneath a simple gray dress. And in the end, that truth proved more powerful than any title ever could.